Hi, today we are learning about ellipses. For the do now, I want you to create 4 3 by 3-inch thumbnail drawings in your sketchbook. Please base each of these drawings on a different object found around your house. So either a can, a cup, anything that is cylindrical, that has an ellipse at the top or on the bottom. I want you to approach these with the method that kind of comes most naturally to you. They're meant to be quick, they're meant to be loose. I only want you to take 30 seconds to a minute per drawing, okay? It's just to get you warmed up so that hand-eye coordination is really heightened, okay? And then when you're done, just hold up your sketchbook so I know that you're finished, okay? Today's objective is to learn how to define an ellipse, how to identify the qualities of an ellipse, and how to compare and contrast those qualities based on vantage points. So how you're viewing an object in space is going to change how it looks, right? And then obviously we're going to be learning how to visually represent all of that in an observational line drawing. Students are going to perform the task by learning the 3 main methods of drawing an ellipse. So observational drawing, 1-point perspective drawing, and 2-point perspective drawing. I'm going to get into what all of those mean. I'm going to give you a definition, and then I'm going to give you a demo lesson. And I want you to take the tools that I give you and apply them to the in-class and homework assignment. And we'll get into what that is later. So essentially, we're going to be examining the physical relationship to the objects and how it affects your drawings. And you're going to be assessed on your ability to apply all of this to your drawings and successfully explain it, okay? So what is an ellipse? It's a geometric shape that results from viewing a circular shape in perspective or from a different vantage point. So this is a cylindrical object. When you're looking at it like this, you can see that it's a circle, but as we look at it in perspective, you see that it becomes kind of like an oval shape. And we're gonna get more into that during the demo. But an ellipse is not exclusively wide and short, but it can be from any variation of that. So this is an ellipse, this is an ellipse, okay? So these are some definitions. I want you to kind of jot them down in your own words in your notebook. And so I'm just going to briefly go over them. So observational drawing, drawing something in space, making a visual representation of something that you see. 1-point perspective is a method of drawing that shows how things get smaller as they go into the distance, and they kind of converge to a vanishing point. And then 2-point perspective is you're kind of looking at the corner of an object. So that's kind of hard to explain when we're talking about ellipses. So I'm just going to show you this example. This would be the corner of the object, right? So it's almost as if we've put an oval into a box, and that box is creating that 3-dimensional understanding of that oval. And then from there, that corner, both of them converge to 2 different 2-point perspective, like vanishing points. Vantage point, different than vanishing point, is just the position or standpoint from which something is viewed. So is it close to you? Is it far away from you? Is it below you? Is it above you? All things to consider. A cylinder, a solid geometric figure with straight parallel sides and a circular or oval cross section. Okay, so a can, for instance. And then a cone, a solid 3-dimensional object that has a circular base joined by a point with like sides that continue down into that circle. So there are just 2 little examples of that next to the definitions. So I'm just going to show you some examples. Leonardo da Vinci and Albrecht Dürer are 2 great examples of people who were thinking about this so many years ago, right? Like this kind of is probably review for a lot of you, you know, from geometry class and stuff, but you know, this is something that had to be identified at a point in time. So Leonardo da Vinci and Albert Durr were both kind of thinking about this and building ellipses using the same method, but they didn't really have any relationship to each other while doing this. Leonardo da Vinci is in Italy, Albert Durr is German, right? But they are thinking about it in the same kind of way. This is a more mathematical way. We're not going to really be doing that. But you can see in Albert Durr's example, the way that his kind of came out is more like an egg. That's not what we're going for when we're drawing an ellipse, right? The red line kind of represents what we're working towards. So it's even all the way around. There's not like a wider bottom or a wider top, okay? Another example of someone who really heavily uses ellipses in their work is Giorgio Morandi. So the example on the left I like to use because you can see like he pretty successfully depicts some ellipses like over here on this tall vase or on that cup, but then this object in the back is not quite hitting the mark. Do you know why? It's because it kind of begins to have kind of like corners, right? So when we're viewing the cup in space, you can kind of see that shape, but if we were to view that object in space, I suspect it would be something kind of like this, not really circular, right? And I don't know if he was trying to depict an ellipse in that piece or not, but just to compare kind of what we're going for and what we can achieve, right? And then on the right is just an example, a drawing, and ellipses are not just the top of objects, it's the top, the bottom, a cross section. So in this example, you can see like this bottom it's an ellipses, but we're not seeing that second half because that object is not transparent, right? And then Hilma af Klint, another example of someone who clearly knows how to draw an ellipse. These drawings are not considering it in a three-dimensional perspective necessarily, because these are abstract works. And just so you know that she is a Swedish artist working in the 1900s, and she's ahead of her time, let me tell you. She had a retrospective at the Guggenheim a year or two ago, and it was really amazing. But I digress. She knows how to create an ellipse. We're not viewing it in space, but I just want you to see how this skill can be applied in other forms of work, right? And then the last example is Janet Fish. And these are representational works. We're viewing these objects in space. We're seeing perspective. But I like these examples because you can kind of see like this object is taller, so that ellipse is, it's like the vertical axis, like here, is much shorter than it is like on this plate that's much wider because it's below it, right? So, you know, based on like the height of an object and, you know, where it's placed, it's going to change these things, right? This is also closer to us than this is, right? And then on the right, you know, she's using transparent objects, which add an extra challenge, right? Like drawing this cup is going to be really different from drawing the can, right? So these are just things to consider moving forward. And now I'm going to show you a demo. Okay, so to begin the demo lesson, we are going to start with the observational drawing method as discussed in our definitions section. So to review, that is just the act of observing an object and creating a visual representation of that object through drawing. So I'm gonna teach you kind of like the simplest way first, and then we're going to move into the more complex ways to achieve an ellipse in a drawing. So I have this pad of paper. The object I'm going to be using is this, a pencil sharpener. You should be sharpening your pencil throughout the drawing process. An eraser. I like this one because it's small. I can use it to kind of get into like smaller areas on the drawing. And then your pencil, I'm using a 2B. Don't use a 2B. Use like a 4H. I'm only using this because I want you to be able to see the drawing. I tried doing this with a 4H and you just can't see it. So I'm using a darker pencil, but you want to use a lighter one because when you're erasing things, you want them to be erased. So you're going to see when I erase that it might still kind of leave remnants on the page, but that's better than you not being able to see what I'm doing. So to start, you're going to take your pencil, and this is your measurement tool. So I'm going to hold it up. You can, depending on how big you want to draw your ellipse, you're going to put it closer or farther away. So you don't want it to be that small. So we're going to put it pretty close to the object, and we're going to line that up at the top. And my thumb is taking note of the bottom point of the ellipse, or the most forward point of the ellipse. So this is going to be our vertical axis measurement. So you're going to pick up your pad of paper and you're going to just directly transfer that length of line onto your paper. So let me just do that really quick. All right, check that and then return back to your object. So now I'm going to take the pencil and we're going to put that back of the pencil on the, for me it's going to be the leftmost point of the ellipse. For a left-handed person, it's going to be the rightmost point. And then you're going to use your thumb again to kind of take that measurement. Okay, so that seems about right. We'll pick up our paper and we're going to transfer the length of that line onto the page. Okay, if you need to move a line over, you want this to kind of be centered, right? So if you need to move anything over, move it over, and then take your eraser and just get rid of any unnecessary information that might confuse you. Now, I would recommend using a straight edge. I'm not using one just so that we can kind of do this together and that I don't have to keep cutting out, like putting the paper down, and I want you to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to be doing this freehand. You can do this freehand as well. It's up to you. So this is kind of the most center horizontal axis that we're going to draw next. So we're going to connect this line all the way across. And this line, just put that up a little bit. And that's pretty level. We're going to do the same at the center. We're going to put in our vertical axis as well. Okay. Cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these lines that we started with and I'm going to extend them outward. So we're going to begin to draw a box. If you're doing this freehand, use small strokes. Don't feel like you have to do one perfect line across. We're not even going to really keep these lines at the end of the drawing, so they just need to be guiding us. Okay? And again, drawing, you're kind of just working through it as you go. Like, you don't have to land on perfection right from the beginning, so you can erase, you can adjust. I'm just going to see how that looks in the monitor, so we're just going to square that out a little bit more, but otherwise it's looking good. All right, so when we are drawing the ellipse, you can kind of see like this point kind of very slowly and evenly swoops. So we're going to recreate that within the confines of the box that we just drew. You don't want anything to kind of jut out. You don't want anything to be kind of square. So start with what I don't want to see. I don't want you to see like that. That's not what an ellipse looks like. Okay, an ellipse is an oval. We want to avoid having any corners or squared edges, okay? So you're gonna take that first point on the left and connect it to the middle. And again, this is gradual. Very gradual. We're gonna continue to do this all the way around.
this box. Connecting those points, making sure that everything kind of evenly slopes. Everything in each kind of quadrant is even. Okay, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Okay. So we kind of have our ellipse, and now we're gonna erase all of the lines that we don't need anymore. Gonna erase those lines in the middle, we don't need them. All right, now we're gonna look at our ellipse, evaluate if anything kind of needs any altering. So I'm gonna put my paper down to do this. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just gonna perfect these lines. It's a little bit easier to do this without the box around. If you want to do this before you erase the box, by all means, go ahead. Whatever is going to help you make the best drawing, okay? Something I just want to kind of harp on again, like, you don't have to be drawing perfect lines, right? I use little strokes, which is why I'm kind of going in with my eraser and kind of evening out those strokes, and that's just going to help you get a better result than if you kind of have like one line and then you have to erase it and then do another line again, because kind of just building this ellipse. Okay. All right. Check that again. Make sure our lines are visible and even. All right. So there you have it. That's our ellipse with observational drawing. Next, we're going to move on to 1-point perspective. Okay, so to begin a 1-point perspective drawing, you're going to need a horizon line. So again, that's just a straight line across the horizontal axis. And again, use a straight edge if that's going to help you. I prefer to kind of just freehand it. Okay, so now we're going to pick our point. I'm going to put this down. You can kind of see here that I have one line down the center of this table. So that's kind of where I'm going to kind of use to pick the point. So it's really just like right straight through, right? So this would be our horizontal axis, the back of this table. And then we're going to kind of just put the point right in the middle. I'm just going to zoom out for you guys a little bit. Okay, so we have this one single point. So we can use our pencil again to figure out how we're going to draw these lines. So we're going to use our pencil and we're going to pretend that back of the table is our horizontal line in the back. And we're going to angle our pencil according to kind of this edge of our object. We're going to line it up. So that's kind of the angle that we're going to use for this drawing. Now I'm just going to freehand that and we'll clean it up as we go along. Okay, and then we're gonna do the same. We're gonna find the same point on the table and we're gonna find that same angle and we're gonna bring it down and we're gonna draw it. All right, we're gonna really wanna make sure that these angles are about the same. Okay, so there we have our first thing. So I'm gonna really extend this down because I think it's gonna be a much larger ellipse than the one above. Okay, so now we're going to kind of do the same thing. We're gonna see how big this opening is. So sorry, and I'm gonna do that. All right, so that's the size of our ellipse. So I'm gonna kind of transfer that onto this paper. So we're gonna have one line at the top and then one line at the bottom using this measurement. Okay, so we have that line. And it was like that, so we're gonna do that. All right, so you're gonna notice we have a very different shape than the first option, and that is because when you're doing a one-point perspective drawing, the perspective in this drawing is going deep into space at this center point. So the most front point of this ellipse is going to be much more, it's closer to you, so it's bigger, right? But it's really not going to end up changing how the ellipse looks, okay? So now we're going to just put down a center line. I'm not going to put it all the way through. You can if you want. And then another center line here. Okay. And again, you're just gonna go through and you're gonna connect the lines. So the shape that you're gonna end up with, like this negative space, is gonna be pretty different. Because this is not gonna be the most, it's not gonna be this part of the ellipse. That part of the ellipse is gonna come kind of somewhere in this part of the negative space shape, right? So we're just gonna connect these lines, right? So that corner of the ellipse is creating a different negative space than it did in the first example. Okay, let's see how that looks. Just as we go. Okay, so I'm just going to clean that up a bit with an eraser. Just see what I'm doing here. Cleaning up the drawing. Okay, so this is a little bit different than the example that we had above because not every quadrant is the same, right? So this is further back in space, so these quadrants are smaller, and these are up like closer to us in space, so these quadrants are larger. And that is why these perspective lines are kind of coming outward from the middle. Okay, but you get essentially the same result. So you can go ahead and clean that up and remove those guiding lines. I'm I think I'm gonna just leave them for right now, okay? All right, and then the third option is 2-point perspective drawing. So again, we're gonna start with a horizon line. Now let me just adjust this so you can see the rest of the page. Okay. So we're gonna start with another horizon line. This time we're gonna have 2 perspective points. So I'm just gonna kind of pick them arbitrarily. So we're gonna do that there and there. And you're gonna kind of imagine them, angle this up for you a little bit. You're gonna imagine them kind of coming like that and like that. Okay, so the top of a perspective line, the bottom. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of transfer that to the page. And then that bottom line, we're gonna do that. It's gonna be kind of like angled like that, okay? Really wanna make sure that this has a center to it so that these line up at the bottom, okay? Now, the difference between this is these 4 points of the ellipse are actually going to be sitting in these corners instead of kind of touching a line, okay? So just to make sure that you can see these lines clearly, I'm gonna clean them up. And we're going to begin drawing. So the corners of the ellipse are kind of going to come around like so. All right, so pay attention to the negative spaces in these guiding lines. They are very different from example to example. The negative spaces here, 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 and here in 1 point, and then in 2 point it's actually more of like a diamond than a box, right? Or a trapezoid. All right, and then we're just gonna clean up any excess lines. And there you have it. That's the 2-point perspective. So to review, 1 point, 2 point, and then the observational drawing. So observational drawing, we'll just add that box back in so you can kind of have a diagram of the several options. But obviously you will erase these lines from example to example. So observational, 1 point, 2 point. Okay?
Okay, so now that we've gone over everything, I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we all understand the key concepts, okay? So, how does an ellipse relate to a cylinder? An ellipse is a cross section of a cylinder, and it is also a cross section of a cone, right? So it's a feature of a cylinder. An ellipse cannot exist without a geometric form for it to exist within, okay? So it needs to be within a cone or a cylinder. What's the difference between 1 point and 2 point perspective? 1-point perspective, the lines of perspective are converging to one vanishing point. And in 2-point perspective, there are 2 vanishing points, right? That's the main difference. How does vantage point affect an ellipse? So to review, vantage point drastically affects an ellipse, right? So is the object below you? Is it going to be wider? Is it going to be smaller, right? Is it above you, right? How is that going to change the ellipse? And that's really what we're going to be considering in this next assignment. And then what are the characteristics of an ellipse, right? So there's a wide axis and a short axis, right? So when we're looking at an ellipse this way, this is the wide axis, this is the short axis. If it's this way, it's the opposite. And another characteristic of an ellipse, it's very evenly, you're creating an even oval, right? There are no like square corners, nothing along those lines, okay? So the assignment, you're gonna need a sketchbook, a pencil, an eraser, one opaque object, so one non-transparent object, and one transparent object, okay? And you're gonna use these objects as your models. You're going to make between 3 to 6 thumbnail drawings. So these are going to be more detailed than the ones from the beginning of class. But I have a range here because some people are going to be really quick at picking this up. Some people are going to need a little bit more time. But I want to make sure that if you get at least 3, that you consider 3 different vantage points, okay? But there are about 6 different options for vantage point in a basic sense. So that's why we have up to 6, okay? And so again, I want you to consider the distance the object is from you, the height relationship the object is from you. And then if you knock out these 3 to 6 drawings really quick and you want to challenge yourself, do a drawing of the can on its side. Do a drawing of the can like kind of angled towards you or angled away from you, okay? At least 2 drawings if you have time for this challenge, okay? And that's really gonna help you truly consider the different ways that you can view these objects. And you need to use a variation of the 3 methods that I have taught in class. So at least one version of each method. So 1 observational drawing, 1 1-point, and 1 2-point, okay? And this is so that I know that you guys understand the concept and that you can apply it. And I want you to try all of them so that you can kind of decide what works best for you. Not everyone is going to like 2-point. Not everyone is going to like 1-point. But I need all of you to attempt it, okay? And then again, for people who are, picking this skill up quickly, I want you to draw the full object. Consider how to draw the ellipse, like using 1-point perspective. If it's, eye level to you, are the perspective lines only going to go down, or is one going to go down and one's going to go up, right? I haven't totally outlined that concept for you, but I want you to kind of attempt it, and see if you can kind of understand that concept, okay? And while we're considering all these vantage points, like move around the room, sit on the floor, stand up, like move around, right? You don't just have to move the object in space, but you can move yourself. And then what is extremely important is that we take notes, okay? Take notes for each of these objects. And what I want you to do for these notes, so I want you to write the method that you used. I'm going to move on. The method that you used. I want you to describe where the object is in space. And then I want you to describe how that affected the ellipse, okay? For every single drawing. All right, and then we're going to take 10 minutes to do that. And then we're kind of going to converge back up, okay? All right, so now that we've gone through the class exercise, I want you to discuss your findings with your partner. So I've paired you up. You're going to go to the Google Drive link that I've put in the chat, and you're going to discuss your notes with your partner and your images. So just take a quick iPhone photo, drop it in there along with the notes. So keep the notes in the picture just for simplicity. And exchange that with your partner in the Google Drive folder. And I want you guys to look at each other's drawings and determine if you've come to similar conclusions about vantage point or different conclusions, okay? You might have come to the same conclusion, but explain it differently, right? So I want you to kind of explore that. And then let's say you've come to completely different opinions. You think one thing, one person thinks the other thing. Message me, tell me your findings, and I'll kind of help you guys understand. And I can also see into those Google folders, so that's how I'm going to track. Sorry, there's a bug. All right, let's redo this. All right. Okay, so now that you guys have completed the in-class assignment, I want you to group up with your partners. So I paired each of you up with someone in the class. You're going to click on the Google Drive link, and you're going to see that you guys have folders that correspond to your partner's name. You're going to take quick pictures of your drawings and just plop them into that Google Drive link. And that's going to let you and your partner see each other's images. And then I want you guys to discuss with each other in private chats if you've determined similar or different conclusions about vantage point, okay? So you might just simply explain it differently. And I want you to kind of hear how other people are explaining it, right? Let's say you guys have come to two completely different conclusions. I want you just to create a tertiary chat with me, and I will help you guys kind of figure out where maybe one of you, went awry, or, maybe you guys are just, discussing it in a different format. All right, now that we've discussed with one another and gone over our conclusions, I want to just introduce to you the homework assignment. So for homework, you're going to continue this practice on your own by observing cylindrical forms found in your homes and drawing the ellipses of these forms. So instead of drawing these ellipses individually, I want you to create an abstracted line drawing composition composed of these all on one page, right? So kind of similar to the Hilma af Klimt approach, right? I want you to implement a variation of the techniques that I taught you guys. So this is gonna mean that you need to have at least one example of each variation of drawing an ellipse. And I want to see evidence of that, okay? And I'm going to share an example of what I mean in a minute. So you're going to need to consider a lot of different things for this. I want you to consider composition, layering, line, right? So composition, where you place things on the page. Layering, do you have ellipses overlapping? Do you have them really far away from each other? Line, are you going to have shaky lines? Are you going to have thick lines? Are you going to have thin lines, dark lines, light lines? I want you to consider the qualities of the line. And I want this assignment to encourage you to apply these techniques in a new, creative way than simply observational. Even though the observational element is important, I want you to see how you can apply these skills in so many different ways, right? And you're gonna have the option to stick with just the ellipses or add the full form. So maybe today in class you only got to include just the top of the ellipse. Maybe in your homework you're going to try to include maybe the rest of the form. But what's going to be tricky about this is I want it to be an abstract image, right? So maybe you're only going to have one side of the form. Maybe it's going to taper in and be more like a cone, and then you use that in some creative way. Like, I want you to consider these things in a different way. And then other things you might consider is creating a pattern, maybe mirroring images, and then negative space, I think, is also really going to be important for this, especially when thinking about composition. So you might erase lines that keep your ellipses from being completed necessarily, but it's gonna, maybe create an interesting negative space that draws attention to another part of your image. And then I just want you to see a couple examples. Let me move this out of the way. So the example on the left is maybe a simpler approach. We're not overlapping too much. There's a lot of negative space, or maybe a more complex approach. There's a lot of layering. There's a lot of considering how these shapes overlap, right? You're filling the page, you're keeping it blank. But I want to point out to you, like, this ellipse right here, it's practically a circle, but I can see I left in that perspective line, right? So I want to see evidence of those perspective lines somewhere in the drawing so that I know that you've used every single option. Like, this is kind of evidential of the observational technique, right? Or here, this is more of the 2-point perspective technique, right? So I want to see evidence of that in these drawings. And we're just going to keep them line drawings. Please no value, please no shading. We are going to kind of be using these as a foundation for a project in the future. All right, so that is our class, everyone. I just want to also let you know that I'm going to be sharing this PowerPoint with you. Every slide of the PowerPoint has links, so you can go learn more about the artists I talked about. You can go watch tutorials that'll go over everything that we did, and all of that. So it's going to be a great resource for you to include. So thank you guys for participating in class today, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.